All right, guys. Welcome to the Real Humans, Great Souls podcast with yours truly, Professor Johanna Sophia of Johanna's Raw Foods and many other ventures by now. So find me on the internet under Professor Johanna Sophia. Just Google that and you'll find all sorts of stuff about me and by me and from me and with me and so forth. Today's podcast is about a topic, of course, that's very close to my heart and that comes up a lot with my clients and with everybody, my colleagues, etc. And that the topic is cutely titled "No Pills, No Ills?" question mark. Can we have no ills, meaning no illnesses, without any pills, meaning medicines, right? Medicines of what we now call conventional medicine, which is actually modern medicine or allopathic medicine or chemical medicine. Really? That's what it is? Yeah, really, that's what it is. So I wanted to start with something peculiar that I saw today, and that was I think it was on Instagram or on YouTube, one or the other. That was this phenomenon of some babies being born with what is called progeria. And that is this super fast aging syndrome, but it's not really aging because there's already a different formation of the skull and the entire structure of the body when the babies are born. And the lifespan is typically expected to be like 12 to 15. And the only longer surviving one was in this video. And I went like, oh, bingo, was the one whose parents insisted on all organic, all plant-based nutrition for this child. So this child with this incredible debilitating condition, which is weird because the brains of these children are highly functioning and the intelligence level is great. So, but this child that lived longer was on a plant-based, organic, very conscientious, very conscious, no refined anything diet, and was working out. So I didn't have the time to follow up what happened because at the time that video was recorded, this child definitely looked much healthier than the others and was running regularly and was 17 years old. And still fully functioning. So it was interesting. And at the same time, just yesterday, I was watching this aging backwards guy. I'm sure you can find him. I didn't write down his name because it doesn't really matter because, many people are exploring these things, but he is the one famous for selling a Braintree, I think was his invention, computer program for lots of millions of dollars. And then had this idea that what he really wanted is to not age or age backwards. And in his 40s, he decides he wants to age backwards. And when he's demonstrating his diet, the only diet with every detail that really, makes it happen. And guess what? There are no animal products in that. what the F? I mean, I was like, okay, so we have two pieces of proof here, just randomly on, random videos that I happen to be watching because of today's podcast and looking into, the medical industry and so forth. And in both cases, a very important part of the keeping the body healthy and functioning, one, preventing this early aging extreme in this progeria. They pronounce it progeria, but whichever. You know what I mean? It's there's another Gilliam something. It's not Guillain Barre, but Gilliam something else. Huntington. Blah, blah, blah. No, it's not Huntington. Hutchinson. Don't quote me on this, honestly, because these names that people who think they discover this particular disease need to put their name on that disease is a weird idea. It's just a really weird concept. It's like having a patent on a disease, which of course is where we're at today. And then, of course, you have a patent because you want to make money on something. So that's the other item we're going to talk about. All right. So these two points I wanted to lay out there first because we have one, early aging and delaying that, and one, reversing aging and getting younger, both heavily relying on the power of plant food. Now, what does that have to do with no ills, no pills, or no pills, no ills? It has something to do with, of course, going back to the inventor of Western medicine. Of course, we have lots of different medical systems in the world, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But we consider Hippocrates, the Greek medical specialist, the inventor of modern medicine. But his saying was, or his main mantra, if you will, was, let thy food be thy medicine and thy medicine be thy food. Of course, that's the old English translation. We could just say it normally. Let your food be your medicine and let your medicine be your food. Simple. So when your body goes out of whack, something is wrong with your nourishment intake. Interestingly, that whole premise has gotten lost in the development of medicine. Well, actually, it starts a little bit earlier. The Romans, of course, used lead for everything. And then later in the European cultures, they discovered that mercury was killing stuff like fungi or something, and they gave people mercury to heal things. And of course, they died even faster. Maybe the wart went away, but the body went away too. I don't know whether they used mercury for warts, but they used mercury and arsenic, etc., and other toxic elements that you can find in plants and minerals and animal products too. There are some toxic fish, right, and so forth. Some excrements or shells that produce very toxic to humans substances. All right, so we have this using toxins to fix something as a approach in various cultures in their medical systems, or what they considered their medical systems, right? So the idea to kill an ill is old. But then here is where it becomes really interesting. just over 110 years ago, 113 years ago, the oil barons of the world sat together. I believe it was in Europe. It doesn't really matter where. The oil barons were already, meeting together or working together. And they were the same names that we still know, the Rockefellers, the Mellons, the Carnegies. Carnegie also being the head of the eugenics organization, which was considered a serious science. I mean, just take that as it is. I'm trying to not be emotional about those things. They literally had a science department called eugenics because they thought it was the hygiene of keeping a population small to have a eugenics program. Literally, that was the argument. So anyway, and the oil barons of the time, and of course Rothschild is heavily involved because Rothschild was the biggest money banking, I was going to say money laundering, of course, you could describe it like that as well, families in the world. Jointly, these families owned over 50% of the world's wealth that could be counted at the time in gold still, with using the old gold standard as the means of evaluating what you owned. And that was because they owned the railroads and the crude oil companies and refineries that were just coming up everywhere. And of course, then also the rubber plantations and all the other plantations, basically, that royalties and countries owned were co-owned and funded by these large families, really. At the time, they were not really corporations in the sense we know today, but they were literally more directly owned by these people. Anyway, so in 1910, they sat together and were discussing what they could do with crude oil. Now, they had already figured out that you can burn that stuff and create heat, right? So you could burn it. You could run a motor with it. You could turn it into gasoline. You could turn it into poison gases. That was one of the findings that led to the first poison gases in the First World War, right? And then they wanted to make everything, and I always make it very short, they wanted to make everything out of oil. Oil was the new building block for everything. Clothing, furniture, homes, building parts, China, meaning plastic. Of course, all of this is plastic, right? It's all clothing that is not natural fiber. It's all plastic, basically. You just spray thin threads of the plastic and you get acrylic and you get nylon and you get polyester, and all these fibers are basically plastic. So they're all made from crude oil, and the crown jewel in this array of things to be made out of oil was medicine. What medicine can we make out of oil? And because oil is a condensed carbon matter, you can break it apart into all kinds of elements and combine it to form new molecules that do not exist on planet Earth, such as plastics, etc. You can also extract all these different things, like chlorine, like I don't know whether fluoride can also be extracted from crude oil, but it would be worth exploring. And the first poison gases, of course, in the First World War, were this so-called mustard gas. It must have had some kind of smell of mustard that they called it that. It certainly didn't have anything to do with the mustard plant. but so, and then chlorine was used as a killer gas as well. And then combinations were made that then were realized to be highly toxic. So at the same time, they decided that all herbal medicines would be called quackery, snake oil, and unserious, etc. And they decided that they would win over the entire medical field with their chemical medicine. Now, of course, if you conceive of a disease being caused by a pathogen, which is a live little entity like a bacterium, right? Or a parasite that you can actually kill, then it makes sense to have poisons that should kill those pathogens that infect a person's body. And you can therefore eliminate it by adding poison to that body. So there is some logic that makes that whole thing make sense to people and defensible. However, the intentions of our dear super rich billionaires of the time, they still are, was certainly not just helping people get well. I mean, you wouldn't have eugenicists founders sitting right in there, right? If there weren't other more nefarious intentions with these new chemicals that could be made out of crude oil. So next we have then the first injections created toward the end of the First World War. Now, of course, the population was already severely devastated and impacted by the war itself. And then were added these very first injections, very crude. Of course, they were also, the injections were, the syringes were glass and metal, and you would, pump into the needle and then use the needle right away for the next person and the next person and the next person. And those injections were first done in connection with what was then called the Spanish flu. That was, by the way, the terminology was superimposed upon the phenomenon of many people ailing and dying really from starvation and nutrient depravity, and also from these poison gases that had been sprayed in the war zones of the First World War. Again, the poison gases mainly being the mustard gas and the chlorine. So you have this exploration of, okay, what can we kill with these chemicals? And you had to have the germ theory, which of course is still only a theory, because at the time we already had adopted the germ theory versus the terrain theory, the two inventors of which were Béchamp of the terrain theory and Pasteur of the germ theory, both of whom were friends and lifelong kind of battling with each other. And as is documented on his in his last part of life, Pasteur actually said, and Béchamp was right, it is the terrain theory. But by that time, the germ theory was already established. And of course, something you can kill makes much more sense to commercialize than a terrain in your body that you have to keep up. So, okay, now we're getting to the era of Hitler and what happens in Germany. And when you look deeper and you find out that that whole system was also funded by the same people that we're talking about here. And those poison gases were developed out of the same substances, oils. And so you have this massive development of poison gas for enormous amounts of death camps, many more than we realized. There were concentration camps all over Europe. I mean, you could not have built all of those without massive funding, again, from these industrial super barons, because it offered another approach, another way to it's hard to put these things in words that aren't incredibly offensive, but I mean, the actions are so incredibly offensive that you can't really pussyfoot around it either. In any case, so we have this poison gas development for the gas chambers that killed millions of people. And then the war is over, kind of the tide turns against that, and now we're the good guys, and now we're saving the Germans, and now we're saving Europe, and we're eliminating that system, and now we're going to be really nice and democratic. But we still are a capitalist system. We still want to use that huge factory called IG Farben, then renamed Bayer. You're all familiar with Bayer aspirin, I'm sure, right? That same company that then also grew a partner company in the US called Monsanto, and recently supposedly purchased it back or merged it back because the name Monsanto had become too toxic in the minds of people. So you have that huge factory, Bayer, after the Second World War, producing all these chemical gases and chemicals. Now you have to either fold that whole big industrial complex, and it's huge. You know, you drive through it. I've driven through it many times when I lived in Germany. You drive through for 10, 15 minutes. It's all chemical factory, chemical factory, chemical factory, chemical factory. Blah, blah, blah. It goes on forever. So you had to make something else with those gases if you wanted to keep that industry going. And it's because it's a big profitable industry for the European market. So you make medicines out of it. I mean, it sounds so primitive and it sounds so silly, but unfortunately it's true. So you have the oil barons, we know the rubber barons, but of course the oil barons are also often the rubber barons and the railroad barons, etc. It all goes together. And we develop modern medicine. Now, of course, we can argue that there are some parts of it that turned out to be very valuable, because with the development of cars, we're also developing more serious accidents, and people need to be either surgically patched back together or will just bleed to death, right? So we develop the skills of surgery, which I think is maybe one of the better parts, if any, of modern medicine. And on the other hand, we develop a system that tries to define as many distinct diseases as possible. And I'm saying this because when you start working in the world that I work in, literally allowing the body to heal itself and coming into an empowered body, then you realize that there is no such thing as a distinct disease, and this is a different disease that comes possibly from the outside, but you realize that you have a failing human body, and it just expresses itself in lots of different ways. So and then of course the more details you discern as being, this is diabetes, this is heart disease, this is high blood pressure, this is that, this is the other, and you have arthritis, you have all these different names. And of course today we have endless amounts of names, as I said in the beginning, and you can't see the connection anymore to the regular biology of the body healing itself. So what you do is you find these very minute distinctions, right? There's these platelets in your blood, or there's this, etc. There's these little holes in your stomach wall. And yes, those are distinct issues. However, our incredible biology called our body, and I talked about that in last week's stream, knows how to fix itself. So with the distinction of all these different illnesses, we have the opportunity suddenly as the medical field to have all these different pills for every little thing that we can distinguish as being something separate and different, right? And that allows us to produce lots of products called medications, with all different patents attached to them and all different colors and shapes and formats in which we serve them to our patients. And I mean, do you see where I'm going here? It develops this huge industry of every little disease having a different pill or procedure and so forth. But because these medications are, again, based on the killer approach, they will also kill human cells, and they will disrupt the self-healing process in the human body. But once you are so stuck in this belief system, and yes, I was going to talk about belief system being, science being a belief system. And of course, we've had many different forms of science over history. I don't know how much time I have. I don't want to be too long either. So yeah, we have the belief system now that we can distinguish between this disease and that disease and the other disease, and lots of different names of diseases, and therefore have lots of different products to cater to each of these diseases. And often this medication, or the impact, the killer impact of one medication will cause other deteriorations, and therefore other issues that need yet another chemical killer, and so forth. So it becomes a self-perpetuating disease producer, which of course is helpful to any industry. Okay, and big disclaimer, I'm not giving any medical advice here whatsoever, never, ever. And your doctor knows best. Go and ask your doctor. Yeah, so we've developed this whole system that has allowed us to feel like we have a response to every issue that a human body presents, right? Whether it's a rash or a headache or all these other issues, we have one particular or a couple of particular different brands then also appear, right, of responses to that physical issue. And therefore, we have a wonderful, incredible industry of medicine. Now, what happens if we take those pills away? What are your experiences? What happens if you take somebody who's been on 20 pills, suddenly take off those pills? Shock, because the body, in the meantime, shock in the body, right? The body is shocked, and of course, it can be dangerous to do that. Because the body has adapted and has tried really hard to counteract all those pills and thereby created other weaknesses. But our biology always tries to adapt and survive. So if you now take the pills away suddenly, it could be that this whole system collapses. But if you strengthen this system significantly, then you may be able to wean these chemicals off. So let's talk about a couple more other medical systems that I have personally come across and have seen the results of. And those are in particular Chinese medicine, but of course, preceding that, African medical systems. Had I already known about, well, of course, I had already known about homeopathy and anthroposophical medicine, which operates a little bit on the power of energy and plants and so forth, but doesn't really take Hippocrates into account enough, in my view, but to some extent. So as a child of Waldorf parents, Waldorf teachers, I should say, I had that experience that my parents were not going with the regular allopathic approach, but were more into the homeopathic remedies, allowing the body to heal itself. And what they did also understand is that, of course, health consists of more than a chemical balance derived from food and or chemicals or medicines, but it also requires, human health also requires rest, good air, good water, and movement or exercise, right? And emotional food, I would add, definitely. Definitely hugs and emotional connectedness with other humans. I'm laughing because I just came across a post that said, humans, in order to be well, need 8 hugs a day. Now, that's very American and, of course, very new age kind of thing, right? Because when I grew up, there were no hugs of people, Maybe occasionally somebody would put their arm around you or something, but it had sort of a little bit of a patronizing notion. So hugs are a beautiful thing, but what I'm saying is that emotional human connection is also very important to the well-being of the human body, of health, and those other elements, those other 4. So in other medicines, those factors are often more regarded. Of course, in Chinese medicine, the experience that I had, and I'll be happy to tell you, I was struggling for a couple of decades with infertility and had already tried homeopathic and herbal, etc., and had already No, I had not gone plant-based. And yeah, I could talk more about that, because not eating plant-based also invites endometriosis, etc., those kind of things, which I had, all of which went away. However, what definitely opened my very clogged up tubes was acupuncture. Very powerful. So there is, of course, another way of seeing the body as an energy body with lines of chi flowing through the body. And when those energy lines are interrupted, then disease has a way of entry into the body or forming in the body, etc. And of course, what it also did for many of my friends, whom I then sent to my wonderful Chinese acupuncturist in New York City, what it did was often healed long-term inflammatory situations in the spine, in the knee, in the ankle. So I have several people that I can that I sent to him that have very distinct healing experiences with inflammatory situations, especially in joints. And yeah, of course, it's the nerve and muscle and joint situation all together that creates the pain and the inflammation. It's always some kind of tightness and cramping, if you will, and getting that to loosen and to heal, so that, for example, a planned back operation, removing a disc, then could be scrapped altogether and that back is fully functioning again. You know, those kind of situations I've had with acupuncture. Now, while there can also be interesting herbal medicine in Chinese medicine, which I have not had that much of. Acupuncture was my main, the main approach of my acupuncturist. I have certainly known about how some of those medicines can help and work. And so that's Chinese medicine. And my experience with Chinese medicine, and literally, I would not have children had I not had acupuncture and my tubes opened up. And then, of course, going onto a plant-based diet and going and beginning to properly exercise regularly, etc. You know, I literally had the early pregnancy exercise videos, you know, the VHS video that you plugged into your player and played on your TV. You know, today to the kids, it's kind of laughable how that all worked, but you know, it worked. So yeah. And then I have a little bit of experience with African medicine, although I never really had the need or the ability, rather, to use it, because of course my African husband was so westernized that he didn't go to the medicine people. I just happened to interview people at the time for a radio station in Germany that then told me their experiences. For example, you know, we think the invention of the pill, and I thought that was a nice example to tell you, the pill, finally the one means to not fall pregnant anymore, was long preceded by other means of preventing women from having children, from conceiving. So contraceptives, if you will, are also not a new invention by the pill. No pills, no pregnancy. It was possible with other means. in any case, the story goes that I interviewed this woman who had gone to the medicine man because she had fallen pregnant with, this is in the time of kind of apartheid in the entire African continent, really, when you think about it. So as I was interviewing her, she was already in her 50s, but when she was young, she went to the medicine man, and she had been, she didn't call it that, but we would probably say she had been date raped, right? By her boss, and did not want to have that child, and went to the medicine man, who made her not have that child, made her lose that child. It must have been very early. And then she had said to the medicine man, I do not want to be pregnant for 5 years. And she entered into a relationship at the time that then became a marriage, so not the boss, but she did not want to have children for 5 years because maybe her emotional healing process, or they're wanting to make sure that they would have a life together. And it took exactly, and he gave her some herbs, and he did some energy, some magic spells. I wasn't there, but the way she described it was that he was very sure and absolutely assured her that she would not have a child until after 5 years. And of course, 6 years later, she gave birth to her first child. So that's just to say that even the pill is just a chemical way of doing what many cultures already did using different means. So yeah, no ills, no pills, no pills, no ills does apply when we have a broader look at medicine in the world. Now, of course, our Western world has convinced us all that we are so healthy and live so long and survive so much because of our Western pills. And of course, I'm just using that term, because there's other means of giving us medications in the Western world as well. But yeah, that was important to me to lay out so that we better understand that when we have these chemical medicines, we inevitably, and I really mean inevitably, create other destruction in our body that our body then has to heal again. And while that sometimes works, you quickly kill a problem, and then you change your lifestyle and build new cell tissue, new whatever has gone bad or has been destroyed by the killer pills. And I'm laughing because nobody has ever said our pills, the pill kills, or the pills kill. And I'm not saying that either. I'm saying that certain parts, inflammatory situations, bacteria that overgrow in our body, invaders, of course, toxins that get into our body, also can create what we call illness. And there is always then the counter kill or the heal from the beginning. And I'll give you one more story before we wrap. It seems I don't have any live questions. So, and for some reason, microphone is not very strong, right? I hope that you can all hear me properly. Okay. I wanted to give you one more story, and that is, wait, what was I going to tell you? Oh, yeah. This did not happen to me, but to a colleague of mine who had a black spider bite while in a tropical country and in in the jungle. You have to, I hate using these words, in the forests. And she decided that she was not going to the hospital. She was not going to take any kind of severe any kind of anti drugs or injections. And of course, it's considered a lethal bite if not treated, right? The black spider bite. So what did she do? She found a local medicine woman who packed garlic and, she says, garlic and basil poultices every few hours onto the spider bite, onto the wound. It swelled and was inflamed, and she decided to, for 2 weeks, eat nothing but natural seeded watermelon. So if you will, backyard grown, organic, seeded watermelon. So for 2 weeks, she lived on nothing but watermelon and rested. So not much activity whatsoever, because she also had a fever from the bite in the beginning. And so she just rested and slept, and every few hours exchanged this poultice. The bite was here on her neck, and she still has a little scar there. And literally 3 weeks later, there was not a trace of spider poison in her body anymore at all. Now, she had already been, I think, a raw foodist for a while, so she was probably able to handle this better. And then her parents, when she got back home, insisted that she go to a doctor and have herself tested, because there's supposed to be remaining poisons circulating in your body from these kinds of bites, but there was not a trace. So again, it's miraculous and wonderful if you give the body a chance to heal from diseases, from ills, without pills, if you know how to feed your body and treat your body with means that nature provides. So no pills, no ills is actually, for me, and the answer is yes in most cases. Yes in most cases. But you need to know a little bit more than just leaving it out and continuing on a junk food diet. So that's not going to work. All right. And here comes the plug. So avail yourself of somebody who can show you how to have enough in your knowledge base so that you can handle situations when your body needs to inflame somewhere because something was overstressed, or maybe you didn't get enough sleep, or maybe you were exposed to too much. The last time I was flying, I got really sick when I got off of that plane. That whole trip, it was very stressful, and of course lots of people around me who were no, not spreading germs, but spreading something much more nano. if you know what I mean. So, in other words, find the help, the guidance you need, just as I search, and I have had certainly mentors in various arenas. Find a mentor, work with me to show you how to teach the body how to heal and wane off your chemicals. Let's just call it that. Wane off of your chemicals. Wane your body. Not wane, wean is what I want to say. Wean your body off the chemicals. So that it can get back into, and it always does, kick back into the thing that it knows best to do, namely to self-heal. And of course, as we age, there still is deterioration. And I'm not saying that, we can live forever, even though Mr. Ryan something, I think, Mr. reversing his aging process, and he was in his 40s, and now he biologically says all the measurements say that he's 18. So even he has to acknowledge that, of course, this life will end, but you can make so much more of being alive, have so much more fun, feel so much better. I mean, I today decided, I just put it out there on my TikTok, and I'm going to put it out on IG as well, that I've decided to shrink my schedule, to slow down so that I can smell the flowers more often. You know what I mean? Stop and smell the roses is the expression, right? So yeah, I love working. I love the work I do, but it can get to be too obsessive, and you need to slow down and allow your body and your soul to wander, dream, breathe, etc. So let me see if I touched on all the points that I wanted to talk about. Yeah, there's a lot more stories, but I think I will leave it here. And I hope that you will post your questions in the comments. And let's talk about what you would like to wean your body off of. Of course, it's not just pills. There's lots of things to wean off of too. It's refined products, refined sugars, refined everything. It's all kinds of recreational drugs like alcohol that might make sense to wean yourself off of, etc. All of that I can help you with and make you shine. All right, guys. I hope this was of interest to you. Let me know. And I shall see you next week. I don't know the topic yet, and hopefully I will be able to better spread the word so that more people can be on live. But I'm okay like this too. Ciao.